Hello, welcome to the Heart Leadership YouTube channel. Um, this is an experiment, to be completely honest. We love talking to people, we love talking about important things. So we're starting a series called Real Talk, which is completely not scripted, it's not structured, it's just going to be real people having real conversations about really important things. When I decided to do this, one of the first people I thought of speaking to, who is in fact a real human and talks about hugely important things, is Lucy Carpenter. So I'm really happy to have Lucy jumping on this first ever video that we're doing. And we're going to get into some really important conversation actually. But Lucy, do you want to just do a little intro to you?
Perfect, thank you. And thanks for having me along to Real Talk. So I'm Lucy Carpenter and I lead the Compassionate Employers programme at Hospice UK. So I do a lot of talking about death and dying and trying to break down the stigma and taboo around those big topics. So I work with organisations across the UK to better equip them to talk about these topics within the workplace, but also to make sure that they're equipped to support employees through really significant life moments. So grief is a massive thing, but also lots of us become carers in our lives or experience a life-changing diagnosis. So it's really just about making sure that we are better equipped to have these kind of compassionate conversations and better equipped to be human as much as possible in those moments.
Definitely, and unfortunately, you and I sort of crossed paths on LinkedIn with a shared interest is the wrong word, a shared
Mm.
story, I guess, which was being both around caring for a sick parent who went on to die. So grief is something that we both really care about, and just on that, you know, compassion in people's most difficult moments. There's nothing that's more human than that. And there's nothing that we need more in our workplaces really than to really see people and hold space in those moments. When I sent you a message about this, it was about a specific thing. Um, Now anyone listening to this will know exactly where I'm from. The accent doesn't hide, and also speaking to me for more than 5 seconds, you know I'm a Liverpool fan. So given that, every single person I've spoken to around the country, around the world in the last 2 weeks, has talked to me about Diogo Jota and the tragedy of him and his brother Andre Silva losing their lives in Spain a couple of weeks ago. And that seems to have completely rocked not only the football club, my city, but everyone seems to have been able to place themselves in that tragedy and in that grief. So I guess I just wanted to chat with you about the Liverpool's response, which I think has been another level, to be honest. Has caused me to be really proud, but also then
Mm.
what does that look like in real life in our organisations up and down the country? So that's what I want to get into, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. And it's interesting when a kind of public figure dies, it's so different because there has to be some kind of public acknowledgement of it in some way, shape, or form. And it kind of catapults this topic that we're not very comfortable talking about into the public spotlight. And everybody has different reactions to it. So there'll be people who will completely shy away from the topic. There'll be people who will go, oh, I'm not sure that we should be giving the players enough time, all of this time off. And there'll be people like yourself, like, people who are big fans who will be grieving that person as well as, really feeling for those other players who are their friends and the family. Obviously, it was heartbreaking. He had just got married. He had a young family. Any of us who have been in relationships and have been in that situation will know just how shocking and how upsetting it could be to put ourselves in that position. So I think whenever somebody dies in the public eye, it's always really interesting to see the way that conversations start around it. And Liverpool's been quite unique in that it's come out pretty strongly with the publicity around going to the funeral, attending the funeral of the players and the manager, obviously, but also the manager's been really, really kind of visible and very public in his speaking around how he wants the boys to return or how he wants them to acknowledge their emotions. And that's been huge. I think there is no denying. And I've got a couple of quotes from him in a couple of interviews that I thought were really like surprising. So I'm not a massive football fan, but immediately when this happened, my nephews are really big supporters of Liverpool. So immediately I thought about them, they're early teenagers. And I was thinking about, okay, how is it going to impact them? Obviously, they lost my dad a few years ago, so they're not completely innocent to the idea of death because they saw that happen. But this is something that's really close to home for them. So it's really interesting kind of hearing the way the club is talking about it, especially the manager, and thinking about, okay, how's this now going to resonate to those younger fans, but also, fans across those different generations.
Definitely. Let's stay on the manager for a second because
Mm,
I mean, I was a big fan of Jurgen Klopp. I love Jurgen Klopp. I thought there was going to be nobody who could replace him. But I can't believe how well I can. But the class that's been shown, the emotional intelligence,
mm,
the honesty, the vulnerability by this manager, by Arne Slot, has been unbelievable. And if you think about it, like you and I both know, you don't get a guidebook for this kind of thing. You don't get,
mm,
for him as a leader, no one's ever sat down with him and gone, right, Arna, one of your players might be in a tragedy, and then what you're going to have to do is lead a group of traumatized young men through the loss
mm,
of their brother, essentially.
mm.
And I just think the way he's so authentic anyway. I'm a big fan of how he communicates generally, and I'm a little slightly obsessed with watching his interviews and things like
Mm.
that. But I just think the way he's handled this situation, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know why I would do in this situation. If I were him, I obviously talk about leadership and culture a huge amount. Uh,
Mm.
but the response from him, I know you said you've got a couple of quotes you might want to mention. I just think that is like the epitome of human, compassionate leadership, but not just, again, he said, didn't he, in one of his quotes, I'm not just talking about this as a football manager, but as a human, as a father, as a brother, and I think, and as a son. And I just think the way he's handled himself has been just next level for me.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because there has been this new introduction of football managers because I think my husband is a Tottenham
Oh,
supporter
no.
and I know, sorry, you might want to kick me off the podcast now, or off the video now, but I think that it's been interesting seeing that kind of uh compassion and the empathy, but also that emotional side to these new football managers that maybe hasn't been there in the past. And I think like a couple of the really good examples in this case is that there was a couple of things where he'd said, don't be any different to how your emotions tell you. Like show up with your emotions on the pitch or off the pitch if they are affecting you. Like give them space. And that's one of the biggest things that we try to, educate people on when they're bereaved in the first place is that you can't outrun those emotions. And actually, if you keep them all boxed up, they'll just wait for you and they'll catch up with you. And at some point, they're going to floor you. So make space for them. And I was so like overwhelmed to kind of see him say that. It's like, actually just bring them with you. Like, and if you want to play, you can play. And if you don't want to play, you don't have to play. Like, honor however you're feeling at that time, but know that you can bring them to work essentially, and that they will be accepted here and that we will support you with them. And I think that is one of the most unique things. And when we talk about workplace culture and we talk about the importance of creating an environment of compassion where the people in your team, right? As a football manager, he will know each of those players so in depth in a way that most line managers never really get to that kind of depth with their employees. And it's partly because we just don't really have a formal process for building those relationships anymore. You kind of just have someone on your team now. And so their relationship is very unique, but he will have also had a very unique relationship with Jota. So it's like one of those situations where he's dealing with his own emotions and trying
Yeah.
to hold the space for those other players as well. And I think him coming out so publicly and talking about it like that is such a great example to, fans all over the place, especially
Yeah.
those young fans who maybe haven't been exposed to grief before, or
No.
perhaps have, and maybe haven't ever been able to express those emotions. This might be, bringing up those emotions in them and give them some space to be able to be vulnerable as well, because that's, essentially what he's doing is creating that space of vulnerability.
Yeah, 100%. I remember starting out at work when I was obviously I was a young lawyer coming through the ranks, and we got told. I remember one of my very first jobs, and we were told, right, you leave emotion at the door. You don't come into work and you leave your stuff out there. So, and that was really sort of confusing. I'm quite an emotional person. I'm very sort of, involved with my own feelings and I'll express them. But particularly in the legal industry where I started out, that was a no-no. He was like, absolutely not. So, and then obviously as a young young woman who was grieving the loss of my mum when I was 23. I didn't know what to do with those feelings. I didn't know if it was appropriate to bring it in. And I also noticed though, when I did go back to the office, no one talked about it. It's like this big elephant in the room, that this big things happened to me, this big life event. And it was a little bit like no one knew either what to say to me, even not how are you doing or how are you today, or no one would say my mum's name or mention anything about it. And that was a really odd experience for me because it meant that I couldn't access my own feelings. I couldn't process them. I couldn't respond to them. And one of the things I've learned later on, that was 13 years ago now, is feel what you need to feel. I always talk about grief like a little dog. So I've got a couple of Labradors. If they want my attention, they'll let me know about it. They'll come over and whack me or hit me with their paw. If I ignore them, they're just going to carry on. If I give them some attention, it settles down. And that, for me, has been my grief journey. So if, these feelings come up and I honour them and I cry when I want to cry and I feel how I want to feel when I need to feel it, you're right. And when you said it, that'll sort of settle it down a little bit more. But if you don't and you ignore it, it's just going to come back and give you a bit of a whack, like my dog example.
That is
But
such a good example as well. I mean, so many of us, like, we try to find the right analogy for this because actually we're trying to make it as human as possible, talking about grief and bereavement. And I often say, we're so scared in the UK, we're so scared of death and dying that even in a hospital, you will not find a sign for a mortuary. Like, you literally, funeral homes look like sofa shops because we can't walk down the high street and see
yeah,
death on our, in our day to day. It's such an interesting concept that we're so scared of talking about it. And as a charity, we work with a lot of healthcare as well. And even then, we're talking to people who are delivering end of life care, and they're not necessarily comfortable talking about death and dying to the people that they're looking after, and they're delivering that care. So it's such an interesting concept that we're so scared of it, which is why this situation is so unique. And it was interesting, I suppose, in lots of ways, you kind of see this big outpouring and this big mourning process. The kind of last thing that I can think of as a comparison was when the Queen died, and there was lots of communication about grief, and there were people that were publicly mourning and going to, lay flowers or visit a site. And I think that, that's it's always really interesting to see how comfortable different communities are. I think football communities are really interesting because, like you say, it's like family, isn't it? You support a club and you feel connected, like whether fans in your local area or not, you feel like you are part of that family that make up that club. And so this is like losing somebody who's, personal to you, but also like you feel those feelings for the rest of those players, for the manager. And I mean, it's interesting seeing like the progression since he's died, looking at, the things that they're trying to do to continue to honor him, like retiring his football shirt or having that minute silence, so that legacy piece is really, really important, which I think something that you do quite well in football and in sports. Like, generally, legacy is a really, really important thing, which is one of the things that we don't see so much in kind of personal grief, is that actually everybody does just go like, okay, not going to talk about that anymore. I'm just not going to bring it up. Like you say, you go back to work, nobody mentions it. Nobody's, even saying to you, oh, I'm sorry that you've lost your mum. Tell me about her. Like,
yeah,
nobody's going to ask you
yeah.
that. Whereas hopefully the players will be able to live in the fact that they're not scared about talking about him or sharing happy memories, and that fans will continue to engage with players and ask them, what are your favorite memories of him, and what makes you smile when you think about him.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the football community is a sort, well, like, look, it can be terrible as well, to be completely honest. But I'm not saying it's
Mm,
perfect. But I often liken um football, when I first started thinking about culture. I've been going the game to Anfield for probably 30 years with my uncle, and we go to our thing, we go to
mm,
match. And this is how much of a bit of a geek I am. But I remember sitting there once when I started thinking about culture and leadership and all that kind of thing. And I remember looking around me, and there was loads of different people, different backgrounds, different races,
mm,
religions, different professions, or people who, were unemployed. so many different people, like a cocktail of different people, which is brilliant. The most diverse sort of crowd I've been a part of. And I remember thinking, all these people have had different days. So someone might have just been married, someone might have just had a baby, someone might have been divorced, someone might be bereaved. Whatever it is, there's so much difference in this ground, over 50,000 people. And then,
Mm,
but something happens at the Liverpool game, the You Never Walk Alone starts, and all of those different people come together and sing the same song. So, and that for me, that there's so much power in that, and there's so much, for me, all of our family funerals and everything have been around a song, so it's a very emotional
yeah.
thing for me anyway. But there's just this togetherness that happens, and then the game goes on,
Yeah,
everyone
there's
you're not
unity,
the
right?
players.
It's
Yeah,
uh,
definitely. So there is, and there's definitely something about that. But then I guess the other, and you don't, again, you don't get that in organisations. I think organisations though are not dissimilar. You've got, let's say, 100 people who are all completely different. They're having different days, they're from different
mm,
backgrounds, they've got different families, different situations. And I think for organisations, it's okay, how can we embrace this difference and sing the same song? What can we do? How can we support that and facilitate that? I think we've got a long way to go in business to be able to do that. But I just think that that sense of community is absolutely key. And I think that's something that, obviously, I've been a Liverpool fan for the last 30, nearly 37 years, and I think I've always seen that in the club through various tragedies. You've got, Hillsborough, all that sort of thing. There's been a lot of trauma
yeah,
with the club, but I do, particularly with this situation now. I couldn't be more proud as to how it's been handled. I think
yeah.
it's been handled impeccably by the club as an organisation, and I think it's been real, it's been true, it's been raw. And I think that the human side of it, because I think sometimes with
Mm,
leadership, sometimes in organisations, we look at what our policy says. Oh my
mm.
God, someone's died. Oh look, you get 2 days compassionate leave, one's for the funeral, and one's just maybe the day someone's died. And I've seen it happen in front of me so many times. People just
Yeah,
put a checklist out. Oh, sorry, your cousin's died, right? Oh, right, they're number 45 on this list of people.
yeah.
You're gonna get half an hour to grieve. And I think we've lost the sort of human touch, and that's why
Yeah.
I respect what you do, and why, obviously I'm excited that you're going to speak at our very first conference in October,
Mm,
because you talk about how can we sort of support humans. Let's remember that's what we are in the most
yeah.
difficult moments that we have, and whether we like talking about it or not, grief is universal, and
It's
grief
gonna
has a
happen.
future. Yeah,
Yeah, I know. And there's a couple of things there I just want to pick up on. Like, I know you said, and it's it's a stretch, isn't it? Football clubs and organizations, but it's not in the same way. Like, as a society, we have moved traditionally away from the support networks that we used to have. So many of us don't live down the road from our family or friends anymore. Like, the opportunity for connection has been so significantly reduced, especially since the pandemic. And more people are looking for that connection. And you find it in football, but a lot of people find it at work. And whether that's through, employee networks, or whether it's through having a really good relationship with your colleagues and your direct team, people find that sense of community and purpose at work. And that's why it's so important to have that level of connection and that level of unity and that level of support, because you might be the only support network that person has. Like we talk about, when you become a parent, it takes a village to raise a family. Well, it takes a village to survive grief, and some people's village is literally their work. Like, it's
yeah,
keeping busy, it's having those people checking in on them, it's having those, virtual cup of teas. Like, it's so interesting, the concept that the workplace, and I think this is the thing that I'm really passionate about, is that, like, we all have a greater role to play in making this a conversation that people actually can access, because there is so much disparity about how people are treated. Like you say, people are treated differently depending on policies, depending on managers' level of education or exposure to a situation. I will be much better at handling the next person who in my team is bereaved of a parent, because I've literally been through that. So that puts me in an advantage. But every manager should have the right kind of training to help them facilitate those conversations and be there and show up. What's really unique about this situation, and one of the, like, probably the best thing about this awful tragedy happening is the fact that Liverpool has put themselves in a position to be this kind of campaigning, like advocating for what is right, which is to be better at raising the visibility around why this is important to talk about it and making space for all of those emotions. There's been lots of kind of signposting off the back of the press and like all of the stuff they've been doing publicly. The signposting in terms of, you know, if you're struggling and you're one of our fans, here's some stuff that you can look at online. You know, that education piece they're taking responsibility for. And then you've got connection where you've literally got fans who are coming together like for rituals and mourning together, but also connecting when you go to matches and having that space for everybody to go like, yeah, like you'll pat the next guy on the back because you know they're also showing emotion about this thing that you're both grieving. And it's so interesting to see. It's like it's totally possible for us to do this as a society. It's totally possible for us to go back to the way that it was where we all used to look after each other. But we're so process driven as a society now that like we don't think about the person who lives 2 doors down the road from us necessarily. Like we don't necessarily think about what was this is a personal reflection, right? When my dad died, he died in the middle of the pandemic. He was a really, really big character, had been, you know, very well known for years and years and years, both in his work and in our local community. And it was the middle of the pandemic, so we could only have 10 people at his funeral. So everyone, hundreds and hundreds of people lined the streets. And we had like a procession essentially where we drove the car, the hearse, you know, through our village and then past his place of work. And at every significant place, there was literally hundreds of people who had lined the streets to just show us solidarity. Like they couldn't be with us. They couldn't even say things to us because they were outside on the road in the rain. But just seeing them there was that sign of respect. Like, I am here with you. There's so much in just showing up for people in those moments. You don't even have to say anything a lot of the time. It's just being with them, like in it. So I just think it's just such an interesting concept. This, I don't know, this is such, like, I love it. I love when public things like this happen in terms of the fact that we can have these conversations more openly and actually relate it to something that is possibly to an audience that would not normally be the kind of people who would engage in these kinds of conversations, because it's so powerful and somebody will hopefully take something from this conversation that we're having today, but also just take something from what's happened at Liverpool, and be able to honour some of the emotions that might come up for them.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for sharing that story there about your dad. I think I can't imagine how that must have been in the pandemic for you. I really can't. And I think the fact that people, you know, even their presence, they're just standing there and they're showing up.
Yeah,
I think that's so powerful. And just on your point of work and community, on our website, it's loud and clear, it says work from the last communities that we have left, and it is. I talk about this a lot, about the sense of community and how I feel like we've become so polarized as a society. It's much easier to sit there argue people on the internet than actually stepping up and considering how you interact with the next person, and how you can make them feel. You can either make them feel a million times worse than they do, or you can lift them up a little bit, and it's all in the small moments. So I think there's
mm,
so much that we can do. So let's just think about some practical things then. So let's take it away from,
yeah,
because people might say to us, all right, Jem and Lucy, this is lovely, but actually Liverpool is you know, huge operation, huge organization with the financial resource that
yeah,
none of us could
absolutely.
dream of. So they're going to have world-class psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists.
Mm,
They're gonna be looked after. So workplaces might think that's all well and good over there, but actually, you know, we can't do anything that's really important in these moments. So I
mm.
wonder if you've got a few ideas, and then I can sort of speak to from my personal experience what would have been good for me. Have you got any thoughts as to if someone's watching this who's a leader and who thinks, you know what? I might need to lead my team through this actually, and I have no idea
Yeah.
what to do. What do you think people can do?
I think one of my best tips is to get to know the people in your team. So we've recently created something that I'm sure we can link in the comments of this, which is a get to know me document. And it literally guides you on how to have that conversation with your team members so that you know how to show up for them when they're struggling. because we're so reactionary when it comes to things like this. We panic and we go, oh my God, where is the bereavement policy? Or where's the compassionate leave policy? Do we have one at all? Like, not all organizations have bereavement policies because that's not actually a legal requirement at the moment. So, I think being equipped, so knowing what is within your organization is really important. So knowing what policies there are, knowing what kind of additional support there might be for people who are bereaved, for people who are caring, for people who are just going through a really hard time and need some
Yeah.
additional time off work or just some flexibility. Just know how you can show up for your people when they might be vulnerable in life. Knowing the people on your team and knowing what external stresses they might have. Are they carers? Do they have young dependents that they're looking after as well as older relatives? Are they in a position that they might be bereaved during their working lives with you? Just get to know them, get to know how you can show up for them, ask them how you can show up for them, how you can support them through those moments. I think so much of it is about that human relationship building. It's something that we're not very good at anymore. Like, we just kind of rely on people showing up, doing their day job, but actually, like you say, we're asking them to also be part of this kind of greater culture, but we're not really getting to know what's important to them. So I think a huge part of it is knowing, um, is that really practical side of like knowing who exists within your organization. And I think the other thing is, like, don't be afraid to lead with some vulnerability. It's really, really powerful to create space for others to be vulnerable. Like, that's one of your greatest superpowers. If you're in the privileged position to be a leader or to be a line manager, and you can create space where people can feel vulnerable and share things with you, then you are one step ahead of the rest. And I think in organizations, one of the big things that we're trying to do is just get greater visibility around these big topics. We know that there's going to be more and more people who die every year. That's just how life happens, unfortunately, as the
Yeah.
population grows. We have an aging population, which means that more and more people are becoming carers. And so they're either having to leave work to, fit around their caring responsibilities, or they're working alongside anticipatory grief and worrying about what the end might look like. Me and you both had that, that personal experience. And I think just creating a space, thinking about actually what happens when somebody comes back to work. I think one of the really unique situations in this example in particular has been that really public display of the manager going, it's okay if you don't want to come back and you don't want to play right now.
Yeah.
Like, you will, like, when you come back, there is space for your emotions to come back with you. But if you wake up and you go, actually, I just can't do this today, then like, it's okay. I mean, how powerful is that? Being like,
Yeah.
your
Huge.
emotions are welcome here, and we'd love to have you back at work, and we'd love to support you, and come back in whatever capacity you can come back in, and we'll get you back up to where you were before, because we're here to support you. We're here to coach you back to that place. We know that your life has changed forever. Like, if you are in a position and you can be a line manager who does that, I promise you, the people who you show up for in those vulnerable moments will never forget you. Like,
No, I think it's spot on, and something you said there really sort of resonated with me in that leadership's a privilege. It really, really
mm,
is, and I think it's a privilege that we should take seriously. And I think that that point about going back to work though as well. So for me, I had to go back because for financial reasons.
mm,
So I was again just I think it was still a Chinese solicitor. I think I was. So I didn't earn very much
mm,
money at all. Um, my mum was a single parent, so we didn't have anyone. Like we had extended family, but really we didn't come from anything in terms of money. We weren't left money, nothing like that. So I had to go back to work, and that was good for me. I needed it
mm,
actually. The sense of routine, the sense of actually being useful at something was really important to me. So I was glad to go back. And I think there's so many people who are in the same situation where actually, you need to go back, or it's right for you to go back. That distraction can be a good thing at times. But I think to your point, a manager, a leader, an organisation, creating that space where people can safely come back and
yeah.
actually know that they're not going to be or it might be a Friday morning randomly and you're walking into work and grief hits you like a punch in the stomach and you think,
Mm,
oh, didn't expect that today. Didn't expect that song, that smell, that triggers me. I think
yeah.
you're totally right that if you can hold space in those moments,
So you
you
can
will
create
never ever be
like,
forgotten.
yeah, absolutely. Creating that space for the human to come out, like not expecting those emotions to be boxed up 9 to 5. That is literally one of the most powerful things you can do. It's going to happen to us all. Like most of us it will happen to in our working lives, possibly, but multiple times for a lot of us. So how do we make space for it? And it's all about that greater visibility. It's all about the greater opportunity to connect with people in your organization and the greater opportunity to have that education. And workplaces have a really crucial role in society
Yeah.
to deliver that, because the ripple effect is huge. What's happened at Liverpool is not just going to be like, it will, like, the impact will be that families who support Liverpool will maybe have conversations that they had never had before
Yeah,
about grief
100%.
within their own family. It's like the ripple effect is massive if you can just be that public figure, or be that person, be that organization who can introduce the, space to have these conversations in the first place. So
Yeah, and I think just on the point of remembering what a leader's sort of done for you, in my experience and the experience I have across organisations and the research, the reading I do, anyone I've spoken to, when you say, tell me about the person that, your favourite leader or had the most influence, never talks about the one that gave them the pay rise, never talks
mm,
about someone who had this big grand gesture. It's someone who saw you in a moment when you needed it. And I
yeah.
think these the big things here are the tiny things. And I think, again, if anyone's sort of listening to this, might not be, might just be me and you chatting, which is always good. But there's power in your next interaction, is what I'd say. And then the other thing
Yeah.
I'd sort of finish from my point of view by saying is, asking somebody, what do you need from me right now? I think we
mm,
don't do that, we assume.
mm,
And again, I've seen you talk about this on LinkedIn, for example. What I didn't need, which I was still grateful for, I didn't need things like flowers. I needed someone to cook for me and bring me some
yeah.
food, or go and get some
Yeah.
tea bags, because there were people coming to my house who I'd never even met half the time to pay their respect. There was practical things that could have been done in those moments.
Yeah.
You need a lift to this place, or
Yeah. Can
these are
you
the
walk my
things. So I
dog?
think, yeah, asking someone, is there something that what do you need from me right now? People don't know how to answer sometimes, but I think it's a good question to ask, because then people can say, actually, I need space, I need an arm around
Mm,
me, I need you to just listen to me vent, and that communication. I think if we can get more used to that as humans, whether that's
yeah.
in relationships, whether it's in our work relationships, whatever it is, I think that's only ever going to make us come closer together, rather than moving further apart. So
Yeah. One of the greatest challenges is that we all think that it's a one size fits all process. And so, if nothing else, and just remember that every conversation you have will be unique. Every person will experience grief in a very unique way. And that might be completely different depending on the person that they lose, because each of those relationships will be unique. So, that might, showing up for people might look different every time, which is why there's never any time for you to stop having these conversations or think that you're a pro at this, because we have all got time to learn, because it is all based on that person that we're working with. So yeah, I just think being open to continue to learn and get to know those people, and get to know what works for them, is going to be the thing that you can really lead with as much compassion as possible for them throughout whatever life throws at them.
yeah, definitely. And just on the to sort of finish us off in terms of that continuing to learn, where's the best place for people to find you, to get in touch with you, to see the work that you're doing? Where's the best place? I'll link it as well, but where's the best place to find you?
Probably on LinkedIn, in terms of connecting and just kind of hearing a little bit about the work that we do. We do a lot of speaker sessions, we do a lot of training, and we also have a really great membership where organizations can kind of come and be part of our compassionate employers community, which is going strong, supporting over 165,000 employees across the UK.
Wow.
So really proud of that. So we're always welcoming new members, of course. So, but yeah, probably LinkedIn is the best place, and we can always put I think my email address is on my LinkedIn as well. So if you want to reach out, I'm all for a chat about what we can do to help you. So
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for having this conversation and for being my first ever guest. And also
I'm honoured.
thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for everything that you put on LinkedIn. Every time I done your post, it's a bit more education. And I think, I always learn something from talking to you and from the space that you hold. So thank you. I'm excited to see you in person in my lovely city in October for Culture Camp, which is going to be amazing. But yeah, so thank you so much, and I'll catch you soon.